Book 3, Land and Labor, Stave 1. What land is. Land, for our purpose, may be defined as that part of the globe's surface habitable by man, not merely his habitation, but the storehouse upon which he must draw for all his needs, and the material to which his labor must be applied for the supply of all his desires. For even the products of the sea cannot be taken, or any of the forces of nature utilized, without the aid of land or its products. On the land we are born, from it we live, to it we return. Children of the soil, as truly as is the blade of grass, or the flower of the field. Of the value of land. Though land is the basis of all that we have, yet neither land nor its natural products constitute wealth. Wealth is the product, or to speak more precisely, the equivalent of labor. That which may be had without labor has no value, for the value of any object is measured by the labor for which it will exchange. And when, in speaking of natural wealth, we mean anything else than the general possibilities which nature offers to labor, we mean such peculiar natural advantages as will yield to labor a larger return than the ordinary, and which are thus equivalent to the amount of labor dispensed with, such natural objects or advantages as are scarce as well as desirable. If I find a diamond, I may not have expended much labor, but I am rich because I have something which it usually takes an immense amount of labor to obtain. If I own a coal mine which is valuable, it is because other people have not coal mines, and cannot obtain fuel with as little expenditure of labor as I can, and will therefore give me the equivalent of more labor for my coal than I have to bestow to get it. If diamonds were as plentiful as pebbles, they would be worth by the cartload just the cost of loading and hauling. If coal could everywhere be had by digging a hole in the ground, the possession of a coal mine would make nobody rich. And so it is with land. It is only valuable as it is scarce. Land, of the average quality, is not naturally scarce, but abundant, and it may be doubted whether there is any country, even the most populous, where the soil could not easily support in comfort all the people, though the law of diminishing returns, as laid down by the English economists, is doubtless true. But the density of population permits other economies which go far to make up for, and which, probably in a right social state would fully make up for, any increase in the amount of labor necessarily devoted to agricultural production. But land is a fixed quantity, which man can neither increase nor diminish, and is therefore very easily made artificially scarce by monopolization. And artificial scarcity arising from unequal division produces the same effect as real scarcity in giving land a value. There is no scarcity of building lots in San Francisco, for there is room yet within the settled limits for 10,000 more houses. But if I want to put up a house, I must pay for the privilege, just as if there were more people wanting to put up houses than there is room to put them up. And the value of land is the power which its ownership gives of appropriating the labor of those who have it not. And in proportion as those who own are few, and those who do not own are many, so does this power, which is expressed by the selling price of land, increase. We speak of railroads raising the value of land by reducing the time and cost of transportation. But let's analyze the operation by imagining the construction of a railroad through a country in which there are few settlers and land can be had for the taking. We will see that the direct effect of the railroad or other improvement which increases the value of the product of land is to increase the value of labor, or to speak more precisely, of the value of labor and capital, in the relative proportions determined by the circumstances which fix the shares of each, and that it is only when the land is so far monopolized as to enable the landowners to appropriate to themselves this benefit that the value of land is increased. No matter how few people there might be, if the land were all in private hands, the owners might appropriate to themselves the whole benefit, This is the result in a country like England. But in a new country, those owners having more land than they can work or desire to work will, in selling or renting their lands, yield some of the new advantage in order to induce people to take their surplus land. It will be said, if the value of land is the power which its ownership gives of appropriating the labor of others, so it is the value of everything else, from a $20 piece to a keg of nails. But in this is the distinction. The $20 piece or the keg of nails are themselves the result of labor, and when given for labor, the transaction is an exchange. Land is not the result of labor, but is the creation of God, and when labor must be given for it, the transaction is an appropriation. In one case, labor is given for labor. In the other, labor is given for something that existed before labor was. Of the value of land and the commonwealth. And thus we see that the value of land, being intrinsically merely the power which its ownership gives to appropriate the fruits of labor, is not an element of the wealth of a community. This principle is as self-evident as that 2 and 2 make 4, yet we seem to have lost sight of it altogether. All over the country, the increase in the value of land is cited as an increase in wealth. Year after year, we add up the increased price which land will bring and exclaim, "Behold how rapidly the United States is growing rich." Yet we might, with equal propriety, count the debts which men owe each other in estimating the assets of a community. The increased price of his land may be an increase in wealth to the owner, because it enables him to obtain a larger share in the distribution of its products. Still, it is not an increase in wealth to the community, because the shares of other people are at the same time cut down. The wealth of a community depends upon the productivity of the community. But the productive powers of land are precisely the same whether its price is low or high. In other words, the price of land indicates the distribution of wealth, not the production. The manner of distribution certainly reacts on production, and so the price of land indirectly and gradually affects the wealth of the community. Still, this effect is the reverse of what seems generally imagined. High land prices tend to decrease instead of adding to the wealth of a community. High-priced land means luxury on the one side and low wages on the other. Luxury means waste, and low wages mean unintelligent and inefficient labor.